Hello, I am John Carr, the author of What is Life, and today our topic is how to fix a marriage. And the reason that marriages become broken in the first place is that both people do not understand what love is. And unfortunately in society right now, people believe that love is a feeling and not an action. And so when that feeling goes away, people start to throw up their arms and give up. And they do not realize that love requires work, requires you constantly going in and watering your grass and not looking to see the other person's grass is greener. No, you water your grass to make your grass as green as the other person's. And the definition of love is that love is to will the good of another. And so first off, that means that you need to know what good is. And I don't have time to go through entire philosophy of life, but if you'd like to read something about that, my book is in the description. But suffice to say for now that the opposite of love is fear. As St. John's first letter that we have from him says in chapter 4, love casts out all fear. So these are two opposing elements. And so, therefore, if you get rid of the fear, you get rid of the encumbrances to love. So remove the fear, and then the love will just be what's remaining and will build up slowly over time as you put forth the effort. So, what does that fear encompass? Well, that fear encompasses anger and pride. Those are the two things that have to be removed from a marriage for that love to come in. So, what are those two things? Well, anger is the fear of losing control, and pride is the act of trying to insulate yourself from pain because you're afraid of pain. So insulating yourself by controlling the things around you. And so those are the two things that have to be removed from the marriage. And there are 4 easy ways of doing this once you understand how it works. 4 easy ways of doing this. So I will go through these 4 things. I'll give you some examples of these 4, well, principles, I think is probably a better word than thing. 4 principles. And then after that, we'll go through a way of starting to enact them in your marriage so that your marriage will be fixed. So, are you ready? Number 1 is to have no expectations. Number 2 is to have no accusations. Number 3 is to know that in part, in everything that you know, you are wrong. And your goal in life is to become less wrong. And you do that by asking questions. It's number 3, it's a longer one. And then number 4 is to never argue while angry. So let's go through each one of these one by one, say what they mean, and some examples of them. So number 1, to have no expectations. And it's very important because love requires freedom. As St. Pope John Paul II says, love is a free gift of self. You cannot give yourself to someone else without having that freedom. If someone is expecting you to do something, expecting you to clean in a certain way, expecting you to parent in a certain way, expecting you to love them or do things for them, make them feel this way in a certain way, they're essentially making you their slaves. And the love is gone from the relationship. Those expectations kill the love, because if you see your spouse as a gift to you, that everything that they do for you is a gift of love, then you can start being grateful for the relationship and building it up. And if you don't have that, then without gratitude, you don't recognize any of the love that's coming your way, and every expectation that's broken becomes a source of despondency. and for both people involved. So it's very important to have no expectations. And it also helps to put your marriage first above everything else in your life, because that love, the freedom that you give to each other, that is what you're displaying to the world. That is what you're sharing with your children. You're sharing with them that no matter what, unconditionally, you love each other. And that is the most essential thing for your children to see, because it teaches them how to love the opposite gender. And if they don't have that, it doesn't matter if you can get them into Harvard. They're severely socially damaged. So that's the most important thing you can teach your children. Everything else is secondary. Then that love that you have for your spouse, it's unconditional. No expectations. That's number one. And number two is to have no accusations. When you accuse somebody and say, oh, you always do things this way, you're always doing that, oh, that's so stupid, you're so lazy, all these things, what that's doing is labeling them and saying that there's no way that that person can change. And that is, first off, it's not true. And second off, it stops the relationship from being able to grow, and stops the two spouses from being able to come together in the relationship. Everyone can change. It may take years, it may take decades, but everyone can change. And it's not positive to put labels on anybody. It just creates division unnecessarily. So when you have this element to the marriage of having no accusations, you then add an element of patience and forgiveness into the marriage, where you say, okay, this person is doing this now, or did that in the past, but that doesn't really define them, because we can change this together when we help each other. So it's very important. So never accuse anyone of being any certain thing. And then the third one, which is the most common with me personally, and maybe with lots of you, is to believe that you're right. Just immediately jump into a argument saying that you know what's going on, and you could assume what the other person's thinking or what they mean by what they said. And that shows a lack of humility and a pretty strong amount of pride. And so again, the third principle is to assume that you are wrong, and your goal in life, your goal, is to become less wrong. So ask questions, and that's the key part. Instead of saying, well, this should be done this way, or this is meant to be done like this, or you have to parent this way, or like this is the right way. How can you say anything opposite of that? And instead of going that route, in pretty much everything that you do together, start with the questions like, well, why do you think that? And, well, what are your experiences with that? And then by getting this collaborative element into your marriage, you end up having, so there's more collaboration with this asking of questions. And then you also can share your experiences with each other, and it just creates more openness to being able to arrive at a consensus with a certain conversation. So it's essential. So every topic that you have with your spouse should be just peppered with questions, because that's how you come together and show that you're open to what the other person has to say. And the fourth and last one, which is the easiest, is to never argue when you are angry. So when you feel yourself getting angry, you just step away, because anger creates a time of it shows a lack of logic. When someone's angry, they're illogical, and so they could say things that are not true, or that they don't believe, or they can end up saying hurtful things more so than they would otherwise. So that's never a good attribute to have when you're talking with your spouse. And anger very seldom is positive. The only time that anger is positive is when you have to physically defend your family, and then you better be ready to defend your family. But that's it, because your spouse is your family. So how can you get angry at yourself or at your own family? It's just wrong. And so if you are angry, you have to acknowledge, okay, I am failing at this moment. Apologize, but I need to take some time off. Or if your spouse is angry, say, I see that you're a little bit too angry. How about we just start this later? And then just make sure you stop at that point and then start the conversation later. And it's essential that you do start later because you want to resolve the issues. So those are the 4. No expectations, no accusations. You are wrong. Your goal is to become less wrong, so ask questions and never argue while angry. That'll give you lots of patience, forgiveness, humility, unconditional love, and logic in your marriage, all from just those 4 things. And that'll remove the fear, remove the anger and pride from your marriage so that the love can enter in and slowly build up over time. So, now that we know what the 4 are, let me please offer you a recommendation for how you can begin to enact these 4 things in your marriage. So, what I would do is first start off and make a list of 10 things that you liked about your spouse before you got into this messy aspect of the relationship. And most likely that'll be the very beginning of the marriage, or even before, because if you're in a situation where you're on the brink of divorce or in some type of a broken marriage, you have failed in upholding these 4 principles from the very beginning. So it's been a slow downhill trek from there. So remember those 10 things. Write them down. Both people write them down. And then share them with each other. Show each other what you valued about them and what you can value about them again. That person hasn't died. That person has not left. That person is still there, just waiting to be brought out of the woodwork. And that should be a great source of hope for you. So it's to bring that positivity back in, see where you two can go, and believe it and commit to it. That is the key. Both people have to commit to these 4 principles because it gives you both a singular rule book where you can help each other get to love, where you both understand how to get there and you both can work together to get there. So essential to be committed to these 4 things. So we have the list of 10, and then the next thing, part 2 of this 3-step process of starting to enact these 4 principles. The next thing is to look at the 4 principles and take turns apologizing for transgressing against each principle. And you're going to have hundreds of them, so just choose the biggest one and apologize. It's just to show your spouse that you understand that you are just as much to blame as they are for the current situation, that you've all failed many times, as every married couple does, in following these 4 principles to find love. And so that'll give a spirit of humility with you, so you have positivity of humility. You both are committed to going forward and learning how to make any marriage work. Because if you can't make this marriage work, you can't make any marriage work. It's simple love. It doesn't matter who's across the table. This is just love. This is the same for everybody. So You do that second thing, and then the last one is you spend 2 hours talking about a relatively difficult topic that has eluded a consensus in the past. So my recommendation, the easiest one, is finances. So how much to save each month. Try that conversation, and it'll be difficult enough to where many of these transgressions will occur. I know in the beginning of my marriage, I was probably transgressing against these 4 principles every other sentence, and it made our life way too difficult unnecessarily. And so you'll probably find that every other sentence that you're saying is going against these 4 things, and it'll be a little difficult at first, but I want you both to call each other out when they go against one of the principles. Be like, oh, try that again while not going against that principle. Like if someone says, oh, you always do that, oh, try that again. This is we don't want to make accusations here. We're trying to come to a consensus. We're working together. Or someone says, well, you have to do this. No, I don't have to do it this way. We are unconditionally loving each other. So try that again. What do you mean by that? And then usually it'll go into someone having to ask a lot of questions to fully understand where both people are coming from. And then, yeah, just to allow that freedom to be expressed in the marriage. So that's how you do it. And make sure you spend the 2 hours, because from my experience, that's how long it takes to resolve a difficult conflict. And it may not work at first either. You may have to come back at it again, especially if somebody gets angry, which you'll have to step away for a bit until they are no longer angry. But just if you enact those 4 principles in that 3-step process to start you off on this road, you'll fix your marriage, and your marriage will be fine. So I wish you the best in discovering the love of your spouse and your love for them, and may God bless your marriage. You're welcome.